want to draw emphasis to that specific morpheme 不. And if you stressed van, then it would sound like it's like stealing the attention to the wrong thing. Hello peeps! I previously talked about the general guidelines of stressing what I call substantial words in Mandarin, which are noun, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs in general, with some adjustments which are frequently de-stressing common words, frequently stressing words with 2 or more syllables, and always stressing words or even morphemes that you want to emphasize. And keep in mind that these are just guidelines. If you get the tone right for a word, and often also the word level stress on top of that, you will sound natural. But in the context of a sentence, it does indeed flow a bit better to de-stress certain types of words. So in this video, I will go over the parts of speech that are not substantial words, and I hope you can take away some helpful tips from my insights. And in a future video, I will go over some specific examples, and I'm also thinking about making a video about what happens to tones in fast speech, which takes de-stressing to an even further level than what I've described before in this series. So anyway, let's get started. In order to save time, I'm not going to explain what every word means. If you don't know what a word means, you can search it on Pleco. You can also ask me in the comments and I'll probably reply with some nuance. But I do want to go a little bit faster than before. Modal particles first. I'm assuming you know what these are. They're awkward to say alone, but if you see any modal particle, and it's usually very easy, there's like the mouth radical, de-stress it always. Next we have de, and there's different types of de, and if you want to search up the grammar on your own, you can do that. But these are already, de-stressed, just like the previous category, modal particles. They're already in the 5th tone. Alright, aspect markers. So you may know that there's no tense technically in Mandarin, but there's aspect, and we use a bunch of markers to mark that, and the most common ones, while some of them are already 5th tone, le and zhe, and then the other ones, guo and zai, you would de-stress that normally. There are some other aspect markers, and these are also de-stressed. I'm just going to use 看 to demonstrate for all of these, all 5 of these rows. So 看起来, not 看起来, but 看起来. 看下去 instead of 看下去. 看一下 or 看一下 if you want to rhodicize it, but not 看一下. And then the repeated verbs 看看 instead of 看看. 看看 instead of 看看, and then 看一看 instead of 看一看. Alright, syntax modifiers, 把 and 被 are the most common ones, but you want to de-stress these. For 把, there's really no reason to stress it. Maybe if you're like talking very slowly and you just say like 把, like you're giving someone a command, maybe you'll say that in a more stressed way, but that's only because you can't think of what comes next. But usually there's no reason to stress it. As for 被, you can stress it to emphasize the passiveness. For example, if you say the fish was eaten, 鱼被吃了, 被吃了, like it got eaten, as opposed to, whatever else that you might contrast it with. So you can actually stress 被, but 把 you cannot stress that. As for 将, so I listed this below, and I separated it because it's a formal way to say 把 in one of its meanings. Because it is more formal, it's more acceptable to stress it, so I have it in dark red. But that's also more of a social linguistic thing, because in colloquial Mandarin, there's really no reason to actually say 将 and prefer it over 把. So you might hear it on like formal programs, news, etc. where people are already speaking in a more stressed way. Now classifiers, and I'm not going to read all of these, de-stress all of them, except perhaps when emphasizing how much or how little of something there is. Like if it's just a drop of water, 一滴水. Like it's not a cup of water, 是一滴水, just a single drop, right? And then there's also there's a whole class of measure words that are like custom measure words or like containers. And I have them sort of on the right in this slide, and they can be stressed more often than the regular, classifiers that just mean like one unit of, whatever. Because the containers, they're more custom, more unique, and you're more likely to emphasize that like it's this thing of this as a, like I'll just give an example. Like you'll say it's a whole pile or like a heap of rice, 一堆米饭. You can have 一粒, which is like a single grain, 一碗, which is a bowl, and those are like more common. But if it's a whole heap of rice, you're more likely to draw attention to that, just like semantically. So 一堆米饭, but you don't have to stress that. 一堆米饭, 一堆米饭. I'm gonna take a moment real quick to talk about opposing processes. So the semantic emphasis on a word increases stress, and the fact that it's a measure word decreases stress. So the latter can actually cancel out some of the emphasis of the former. So if a word were originally going to be overstressed because you emphasize it, maybe now, because it's a measure word, the stress goes down, so it's like a normal or moderately high level of stress. And I can't prove that that's actually what's going on, but I can identify some general patterns. And when they do overlap, how speakers treat the stress in that specific case is rather idiosyncratic, I would say. So don't be like meticulous in that calculating about, oh, stress goes up and then like down a bit. Like, no, it is highly, personal and dialectal. And what I would recommend is that you take my tips and internalize them. Perhaps if you've like listened to enough Mandarin, you've already internalized a lot of this, and maybe you just have not consciously thought about it. And I don't want you to change the way that you internalize these stressing patterns, because chances are your internalization is actually more human, more accurate, and more expressive than the rules that I present, which are generalizations. And I know of plenty of non-native Mandarin speakers that develop a native-like prosody, that sort of intonation of the accent without consciously thinking about the things that I talk about in this series. And I think that's because humans are very good at picking up complex patterns of intonation. So don't take it too seriously. Just know that there might be opposing processes, and just rely on your intuition for those. And oh yeah, here's a special case regarding classifiers. So when you say, like you have the structure, like a number and then the next number. So like if it's 1 and then, then it's 2. And then the classifier, which means like you have, like 3 or 4 apples or, 3 or 4 bags of rice or whatever. Like 6 or 7 units. In that case, you actually want to stress the classifier. Just in that case though. So, 比如说6、7个 6 or 7 units of whatever. 有1、2种 1、2种 1 or 2 types. So, one number, the next number, it could be 2, 3, 2、3个 3、4只 5、6本. So only in that case, stress the classifier. Alright, adpositions. You can de-stress everything, but in practice, it's not done, the de-stressing is not done as frequently as you do with classifiers. Also, two-syllable prepositions and postpositions are more likely to be stressed than their monosyllabic counterparts, which should be rather obvious based on what I have been saying. And prepositions also are more likely to have stress, and I'd say that's because these are more unique words, the prepositions, than the two-syllable postpositions, which are basically just variants of the single-syllable locative postpositions. 上下里外, the third row here, which are de-stressed because if you wanted to stress them, you would just use the disyllabic version. So 上面,下面,里面,外面, and you can also use 边, which is roticized in the Beijing accent. So you would say 上边,下边,里边,外边. And for those, you do want to notice that the second syllable, the 面 or the 边, is de-stressed, and that's a result of the word level stress, not even the sentence level stress. Alright, numbers. So for counting, stress everything. So like if you're saying a phone number, 我的电话号码是12388856990. For instance, I would, stress everything. You can hear it going up and down the tone. Also, before classifiers, numbers could be stressed for emphasis, but generally they are de-stressed, especially E, which is pronounced E or E here. And I'm assuming you know the tone sandhi rule for that. And then for the rest of the numbers when you're counting, so like before measure word 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you can sometimes stress it. I would say it's more likely that you stress these numbers than E because, chances are it's more likely that a specific number is more semantically salient than just the number 1. Also, on the last row, 2 and 3, these mean 2 or 3, but you don't have to use it with a measure word. So they're sort of special. And they can also be used after plural pronouns. So 我们, you can say 我们俩, 你们,你们俩,你们仨. And these are likely to be stressed because, again, 2 or 3, the specific meaning of the number is more likely to be salient, like relevant to the conversation, than 1. And that applies especially for sa, which means 3, like 3 of something, because 2, the 俩, can sort of mean like a couple. It technically means 2, but like it's a little bit more loose than that, like, a few, a couple. Alright, pronouns. I use slashes instead of commas for the third person singular pronoun because historically they're the same word, 他. They're pronounced the same still, and the only reason they're written differently is because of European influence. And actually in Taiwan, they even use the feminine form of you, 你, which is just written with like the female radical instead of the person radical. One thing you'll note is that 们 in the plural pronouns, 我们,咱们,你们,你们,他们, that's always de-stressed, always. And then for the other characters, you can definitely de-stress them, and often they are de-stressed. Of course, depending on emphasis, but I would lean towards de-stressing unless you're making a point that, like, it was you who did it, not her, or something like that. Like, 是你干的,不是他, Alright, negation particles. These tend to get stressed because the distinction between like positive and negative, yes and no, doing something and not doing something, is usually pretty important, but you could also de-stress them since they are small words. So again, with opposing processes, I would just lean towards stressing them because it's usually an important distinction. you definitely will not sound awkward if you stress these all the time, except for 不 as a complement affix, which we will get to that later, but that's a specific context, so we'll revisit it. And there are some like more formal words that mean similar things, but these two, 不 and 没, are the main ones. All right, conjunctions. So conjunctions tend to get stressed more than a lot of the other like particle sort of parts of speech, because they are integral to the logic of the sentence. You know, when you're connecting sentences, you know, one clause is despite the other clause, or it is because of something. So you want to stress these to emphasize that point a lot of the time. Yeah, a lot of the smaller ones, like on the top, 和 跟 与 同 以及, these basically mean and or with, and these are actually de-stressed more often than not because they're just small words and they don't really connect clauses. They tend to connect noun phrases. All right, verb complements. So these are like the final character of a verb phrase that begins with like the verb stem, and then you have de or 不 in the middle sometimes, and then you have the verb complement, which is like 完, 了, 见, 到, 好, things like that. There's a bunch of them. You can search it up. So all of these verb complements can be used with or without de, except for 了. So you'll see the second one, I have the parentheses and de. 了 requires de in front of it. Also, complements that end with le require the absence of de. So like 死了, 饿死了, like I'm hungry to death, that sort of thing. Or 急了, 好极了, like it's good to like a extreme level. And the one predictable rule is that if you use de, you can stress the complement, but doing it versus not doing it produces different effects depending on what you're trying to say. Another question is, do you stress the verb in front of it? Yes, unless perhaps in the context of your conversation, it's no longer a substantial word because you use it so much. And in that case, the complement wouldn't be stressed anyway. But that case, I would say, probably doesn't happen very often, because remember what I said about long words tending to get stressed more. So to reiterate, assuming you choose to stress the verb, the complement can be stressed if you use de, and if you don't use de, then know that directional complements like 下, 过去, 回来, those things are de-stressed. And as are these specific complements, 见, 到, 死了. I might be missing some, but that's what I can come up with. And do feel free to go back and re-listen to it because it is sort of complicated. But yeah, anyway, other than those specific complements, 见到 and 死了, you can stress it. And now for like what the effect is based on whether you actually stress it or not. You're going to look at the example below. So I have 看完, 看完, 看得完, and 看得完. So 看完 in the top left means, did you finish looking at or reading it? Like, are you done with looking at or reading it? It's a neutral question. Like, you're just wanting to find out the answer. 看完, so to the right here, it's like, did you even finish looking at or reading it? Are you finally about done with looking at it or reading it? So it has a more doubtful, impatient, dismissive sort of vibe. So it's not always bad though. Like, it could just indicate that you're very focused on getting an answer, or you're just urging someone to finish looking at or reading something. You might have a alert expression on your face, like, come on, and you might expect the person you're talking to answer very quickly to that question. So it's similar to if you ask, so are you done reading? in that sort of intonation. Now the bottom row, 看得完 on the left. Can you finish it? Can you finish looking at or reading it? And this is a neutral way to ask about the possibility. So the da means it implies possibility. So like, can you do something, as opposed to are you actually, finishing reading it? And it's a neutral sort of way when you stress the complement. But when you don't stress it, it has that doubtful, expecting, alert, sort of urgent vibe. It's like, can you even finish looking at it or reading it? 看得完吗? Yeah, and also here's what I mean by 见到, etc. can't be stressed without de. So if you replace the van in this example with 见, so the top word on the left where it says 看完, you would expect 看见 with stress on both syllables. And I would write the 见 in black. But no, it would actually be in red. Because 见 cannot be stressed in that particular row, that means. So it's identical to the top row word on the right. So you would only have 看见. There is no 看见, just due to the nature of that specific complement. But for the bottom row, for like potential or like ability, you can still have 看得见 and 看得见. Only when there's no de, you cannot stress that particular thing, as well as the other ones that I listed, 见到死了. So even though you don't have that ability to choose stress versus no stress, you can still have like a differentiation between neutral and like an urgent way of asking. And it would just be based on context clues. All right, real quick, complement affixes. De-stress them. The special case is if you specify that you said 不 when someone misheard you as saying 的. So like if you said 我写不完, I cannot finish writing it. And then someone's like 写得完啊? Like, did you say that you could finish writing it? And then you would say 写不完. 写不完. No, I cannot. And usually the van here would get stressed, but it's a bit less stressed here because when you emphasize a morpheme, in other words, the 不 here is emphasized, the words around it, more specifically behind it, like after it, get de-stressed a bit. It tends to happen because you want to draw emphasis to that specific morpheme 不. And if you stressed van, then it would sound like it's like stealing the attention to the wrong thing, right? So 写不完 would sound rather weird, but 写不完, that means you're clarifying that you really said 不 instead of 的. Alright, question words. So question words tend to get de-stressed because you use them in questions, so of course you want to emphasize what you want to find out. So actually in Mandarin, except for 为什么 and 怎么, when it is de-stressed and thus means how come, these question words all also have secondary meanings that are not question words. So who, 谁, can also mean whoever. Like 谁杀人都不行. Like no matter who kills, that's wrong. And what can mean whatever, like whatever the reason is, blah blah blah. Also, 几个 means how many, but if you de-stress both syllables, it means a couple. 有几个, like I have a few. And that would not be a question word, but it's just good to know. Oh yeah, another note about 几个. The 个 could be replaced with any other measure word. So you could say 几只, and you could, stress the 几 or not stress it. And if you stress it, it's the question, and if you de-stress it, it means a few. And as for 怎么, that means how, but if you de-stress the 怎么, it means how come. So it's a way to ask why, basically. 你怎么这样呢? Like, why are you like this? How come you're like this? And also there's a dialectal informal way to say 怎么, and that is 咋, which also follows the same pattern. So if you stress it, it means how, and if you de-stress it, it means why, like how come. 咋 你咋这样呢? Yeah, that is it, folks. If I missed a part of speech or if you have questions, just ask me in the comments. Like I said, I will be making a video going over some specific audio examples and also a video discussing what happens to tone when you start talking fast. So maybe I'll even combine those two videos in one. But I'm currently working on some other projects, so do feel free to subscribe if you like my music or my fruit review videos. Yeah, and if you found value in this video, you know, if you like what I presented you and you think it's helpful, do give me a like. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm and ensures that more people find this video and are able to produce Mandarin prosody in a more natural way. So see y'all next time and have a great day.